Well, hello. Welcome, everybody, to Super Soldier Talk. My name is James Frank, in case you didn't know. And I have two special guests here. But today, before you all put comments in there, why are we not letting Michael talk enough? The show is for Jimmy Paine. Michael is joining me to help ask questions. But Michael, I know you have a very amazing background. You've been on the show here a couple times already. And I want to thank you for coming on here short notice, as I think I probably dialed about 25 different people, and you were the only one that said yes. So this was meant for you, and for you too, listeners. Also, thank you for joining us. Those of us on the live stream, and for those of us post the live stream, thank you all. So let's start with, I guess I was already on Michael. So he is a scientist, pilot, inventor, physicist, and a contactee. In his younger years, he was employed by a DoD contractor on a missile and satellite system software development program, and as well as exotic energy research. In the summer of 2001 in Phoenix, he had a 12-minute first-hand encounter with pale-skinned 8-foot Cruxians from the Crux constellation who uploaded 5 exabytes of data into his pineal gland, which gives Michael the ability to answer any question when asked. Well, maybe not like future, right? You don't know the future, or you do?
Probabilities. It's all math.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am so tempted to ask you questions about the elections, but oh my gosh! I probably shouldn't have said that. Don't answer. Well, we can. I tell you what. Maybe we could do a show later about that. But these ETs encourage Michael to share a message that humanity needs to grow up and stop self-dividing and conquering. His book, Wake Up and Do Something, shares more of these details. So he was also you're in a band, Element 115. So
Element 115 was cool because we had an alien drummer, and nobody's ever done a band with an alien drummer. And so, yeah, it was very, very cool. And it was my family that was in the band, plus the alien drummer. So if you're curious, if that piqued your curiosity, element115theband.com. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Oh wow! And so Element 115, is that what Bob Lazar was getting his hands on?
In fact, what the band was going to be called Alter Ego, and then I looked and found that there was 100 bands in the United States named Alter Ego, and so we were sitting in the studio trying to figure out what we're going to do next, and I saw the video of Bob Lazar. I saw the spine of the VHS video that said, Bob Lazar, and I thought, well, what about Element 115? And the whole room kind of thought for a second, went, that rolls. Element 115, yeah, we like it. So then next thing you know, I got challenged into making an alien drummer, and the alien drummer came into being. In a really for 2005, it was very advanced, and we had a lot of fun with it. With the band, being your family and the band at the same time is really amazing. It's a great experience. I wish everybody had a chance to do it.
Wow, thank you so much, Michael. You're such an amazing person, and we even have Jimmy Paine here tonight. Jimmy, I just muted you because we're getting a little feedback, but Jimmy, you there? Oh, yeah, you muted yourself. Okay, you have to. There you go.
Can you hear me? I thought I had it muted a while ago.
How are you doing today?
Real good. A little bit of rain here this afternoon, and just getting settled in for the night, and looking forward to for the night's show.
Absolutely. So, for audience members who do not know, Jimmy's been on the show quite a few times. I would say you're probably one of my more. I mean, I love all my guests, but you have so much information that we just have. No matter how many shows we do, here's how I find out. Oh, who else were you? Were you Forrest Gump too? Oh wait, don't tell me. Tell me. We'll find out. So Jimmy Paine will be speaking today about his secret mission from Vandenberg Air Force Base, where the Saturn V rockets were shot off, and this Apollo 20 mission, where he, alongside with William Rutledge, and they discovered a oriental-looking humanoid named EBE Mona Lisa. Jimmy claims the Apollo 20 footage on YouTube is real. Super Soldier Jimmy Paine, aka Dallas, was in the secret space program from 1959 to 1996. During this time, he was a shuttlecraft pilot for the Tall White Warriors at Area 51 and participated in time travel missions with the Montauk Boys at Camp Hero. He also recalls working for Weyland Corporation, where he encountered a xenomorph at LV-426, which the movie Aliens was based off of. He was stationed on Mars, Titan, and the Moon. On Mars, he has seen a broken statue of a giant face of a humanoid on a mission in 1974. So this would have been before the Apollo 20 mission. Well, wait a minute. Jimmy, didn't you say you were like the first person in outer space? Oh, no, wait, that would have been the Germans. But the first NASA astronaut.
I was the first one that orbited. Should have been a chimpanzee by the name of Ham from Holloman Air Medical. That chimp did do an orbit, but I went prior to his orbit. And he is out at the New Mexico Space Museum. His skeleton's on display, but his flesh, once he was deboned after he died, is buried out by the flagpole. And my craft, called the Little Joe, is on display. That's the one that Ham did an orbit in as well.
Oh, wow. Wow. So, Jimmy, why don't you explain what's so maybe take us back to the basics here. I know you've been on the show before. You've talked about EB Mona Lisa, where you were, I think you said you were the first one to touch her, right?
Well, let me go back and to the beginning of how I first became acquainted with Mona. When I was very young, maybe about 6 years old, I was routinely being taken to Area 51. And because I was so young and small, a lot of these little grays, they grow about 3.5 feet tall, 3 to 3.5 feet tall. And you can't get a full grown pilot in a flying saucer. So what they would do, they would get young children like me, and they would teach us how to fly the craft. And then as we grew older and we couldn't get in the craft, we would teach other children younger than us how to get into the craft and how to fly it. But how I met Mona was I used to channel when I was younger. I was gifted with able to channel. And I was channeling, and when I first communicated with Mona, and the reason I name her Mona Lisa is because in her alphabet, like our alphabet has 26 letters. Now her alphabet has close to over 40 letters in their alphabet. So we can't say her name because we don't have her alphabet. Okay. We can't read her language because we don't have their alphabet. So I saw a picture, a painting when I was in school of the Mona Lisa most people are familiar with, depicting a woman from the 16th century. And so I just named her Mona Lisa. I just gave her a name that I thought of. But when I communicated with her telepathically, I did it for a couple of years, and in her original life, Mona, she's a pilot, but she's also a biologist, and she collects flowers, and she also is very interested in insects. Okay. But all of them on that craft are duly trained. So she is a pilot, and she is also a botanist. Okay. And she collects flowers and insects. But there was 4 of them that that survived the craft, crashed, but I never could get the 4th one to talk to me or communicate with me. Only 2 others that I communicated with telepathically. So that's how I knew her. I've been knowing her since I was 6 years old. Now, let me start back about 2 years prior to me meeting William Rutledge, or should I say Commander Rutledge. Back in 1973, I came out of Vietnam. And when I came out of Vietnam, I was in and out of Vietnam many times. But when I came out of Vietnam, they wanted to send me back to Nellis Air Force Base. And I was supposed to go and hang out at the Las Vegas casinos and around Frank Sinatra and all that crowd to give them kind of like an escort service. But I was at that point in life where I guess what I was suffering was from PTSD. People didn't understand it then. But when you come out of jungle, you're used to the noise of a jungle. And it's very different from the noise inside a casino. So my godfather, decided, said, well, Jimmy needs to go somewhere where he can adjust and, merge back in with society. So across the border into Mexico, deep in old Mexico, there was a church down there that had been closed up for about 10, maybe 15 years. And that was a smuggling route from Mexico back into Nevada. So I went down there with another individual, the pilot, and we opened the church up. They had been closed down for about a decade. And I took my cover was I was going to act like a missionary to blend in with the local population. So I had a robe on, and I was basically a missionary down there, and we were going to reopen the church up because the area had been, it was like war torn. There had been gangs fighting down there for the control of the contraband, and they had pretty much killed each other out. And so I went down there. There was no electricity. The little creek by the church was dried up. I had a hand well that you could pump outside the church, and there was nobody in that little village. The village was completely deserted, and the road was very seldomly traveled. Now there was a village to the northeast of me, about 8 miles to the northeast, that had maybe 1,200 people in it, and then there was a village to the west, the northwest of me. It might have had maybe 400. And there was a road that ran from those 2 villages to the north of me. and there was a road that ran to the south of those two villages down by me. So the road to the south was very seldom traveled. And what would happen, the airplane would land. We would load up the plane with contraband. The pilot, would take off the next morning and deliver the contraband back to the States. So the first 6 weeks I was down there full time, watching the flow of the traffic, which was I only seen like 4 times somebody went through that road down by that church. So I knew it was relatively safe. But one day, a woman pulled up. She couldn't speak good English, and she was hysterical. And there was a goat in the back of her pickup truck, and the goat was, looked kind of ill. And she's crying, and she's looking at me and pointing towards her goat, and then she pointed towards my medicine bag that I had on my hip. I had a leather pouch on that I had used when I lived up at Nellis Air Force Base. I used it. That was my medicine bag that the Native American Paiutes use for various ailments. So I didn't want to, blow my cover. I said, I picked their goat up. I brought it in to the quarters that I lived in, and put it down, with the cage and everything. And she left, and I pointed to the sun, and I raised up like 5 fingers that meant for her to come back in 5 days. And but she left, and I ended up, I had some an IV in my first aid kit. I put that into the vein of the animal to rehydrate it, and I used up whatever medicine I had in my pouch to detox the animal. And but anyway, a day or two passes, and the animal's standing back up. And the animal recovered. So 5 days pass, she comes back, and she is delighted that her goat is alive. Now, she left, and I went over across the creek, or that little dried up creek, to the farm, and come to find out that her brother had gave her the goat, and her brother had been murdered by the police. And so that goat was her emotional support animal. And but come to find out, her nephews were involved with me doing the transportation of the contraband. And so
Jimmy,
that was
could you be more specific? Are you allowed to be more specific? What was the contraband?
I would kind of like to be not too specific.
Okay, well, we can
But
just guess.
we'll go on with the story. It's not much more. But anyway, her nephews got a kick out of it. And but come to find out, this went on, like I said, for about a year. The plane would land. We would load up the plane with the contraband. They would fly it out. And I got to be pretty good friends with those folks down there. I would take bets from them in the back of the church, and bet on ball games. I was their bookie, and so they made a lot of money off of the games. But it got to the point where they were trying to get me married off to to some of the women in that group. And you know, at that age, 17 years old, you know, I want to see the world, you know. So an opening came up between New York and Spain, international route. So I said my goodbye, and you know, they didn't want me to go. They gave me a Rolex watch. They thought they were losing Father Paine, their priest, you know, but that was just all you know, a front, you know, where I would, you know, use the missionary as a, you know, a cover story. But it ended up, that was the beginning of the Sonora cartel. What we now know as Sonora cartel, those were the original members of it. So
Hey,
I got
Jimmy, quick question. Do you think Billy Graham is involved in that contraband activity too?
I can't answer that, James.
Okay.
But he ended up getting a really good recommendation in that type of the world, you know, where you smuggle stuff. Sonora cartel, you know, they didn't want to lose their Father Paine, you know. So I said my goodbyes, and I parted, because, you know, it's time to move on and see the world. And this was good because that put me on my days off in New York. I would be able to go back down to Camp Hero on my down days and hang around Camp Hero. But when I made my first trip from New York to Spain, I thought I was going to be going to Madrid, where I'd be stationed at. But on my way, just as we were coming into Spain, we got an emergency call through the radio on the plane, and the pilot used to room with a guy from NASA. They used to be drinking buddies, you know. And what had happened, some type of they had an accident at one of the Apollo tracking stations on an island off of North Africa, and they had lost power, and they were on backup battery power, and you know, they needed the plane to land at an airport, and where they could put you know, load it up with cargo. Now NASA can get stuff to those facilities. The problem is that, you know, when you're fooling with different countries, you know, you lose time going through all the paperwork. This was an emergency, and so being that the guy from NASA was very familiar with my pilot, you know, he just called out for help because he knew he could get the parts quicker. So once we landed, I was put in a hotel room to get some sleep, and they were going to service the plane during the night, and they were going to load the plane up with equipment. So the next morning I was brought back to the airport along with the pilot, and the plane was loaded up with generators, water, just all kinds of stuff. So we departed Spain, and we flew back to Morocco on the that's the first country on the northwest of Africa. And then we flew down through Morocco to the very end of the country, where's the Sahara, where it meets up the Sahara there. And if you go by the borderline of Morocco, you go out about 105 miles out into the ocean. That's the island that NASA had a tracking station on. So we went out there to the island, and I got there, and sure enough, all the power's off. And we went into the control room. There's been a fire in there, an electrical fire. And apparently what happened, they had a surge in the power station. Something shorted out in the power station, and the power line that ran in the control room fried, and it burnt up some wiring on the board. It also ran up the side of the satellite dish. It burned the cables, the electrical cables that operate the dish as you turn the dish to align it with the spacecraft. So I stayed down there maybe 4 or 5 days, assisting the technician. We were pulling the wiring out of the wall, and we ended up getting about 2 pallet loads of burnt wire loaded onto these wood pallets. By that time, NASA had flown in, I want to say about 8 to 10 electricians. All right, the electricians, when they landed, they went into the powerhouse. They worked in there 24 hours a day. Some of them would be sleeping in the bunkhouse, and they took their own shifts. So there was always somebody working in the power room, working on trying to get these motors back, these generators back up. But
well, Jimmy, is this? I think these are the Azores, if I'm not.
Yeah,
Not, the Canary Islands are over here.
Yeah,
so,
that's where it's at out there.
Do you remember which island it was?
James, you have to get a little closer. I can't really see the lettering.
Well,
it's not that important now.
Okay. Do you think that facility is still there?
Yeah, it's still there. But what happened was during the evening, right before we'd knock off, we'd go in there and eat in the control room, me and the technician. And I say one thing, they're very friendly people that are there. And I got to talking to them about, hey, I raised Ham, the chimpanzee. They didn't know that.
Oh, wait, Jimmy, I want to show you something. Are you sure it's Ham and not Sam?
Ham.
Okay, because if you look at, I looked up little Joe. Was this the rocket?
Yeah, that's my rocket right there. That's supposed to have the chimp in it, but they call that the little Joe.
Because there's a picture here of this is Sam.
No, that's one before Ham.
Okay.
I don't know that little chimp there, but
okay.
Ham is we'll get into him later tonight. Let me go on with the story. Right. So, I break the ice with these guys, and they know they're talking from somebody who raised an astronaut chimpanzee. So on the board they had a map of Africa, and they had dots on it. And I knew one dot was the island. And I asked the technician, I said, what about these other 2 dots? and one was in Nigeria. And they said, well, that's a tracking station in Nigeria. And then I looked down into the Indian Ocean, about 20 miles off the coast, and I asked them about that tracking station. Well, they got kind of quiet, and he paused and he said, well, that station's been decommissioned. It decommissioned in 1964. And what had happened was they had had a war down off of Tanzania, and that facility was evacuated. And of course, metal thieves have stowed all the parts, and the buildings are overgrown by vegetation. There's nothing there anymore. But I believe that station that I asked about, the one they kind of cringed up on, that wasn't all that far from Rwanda, where William Rutledge was at. But after we got the power back on, and I climbed the tower and replaced the motors on the dish. And once we were able to get the station back on power, I went out during the night. You could see the rocket, the spacecraft fire its projectors. Cause see, they have to have to trim it to bring it back into the very line. That's how it communicates with the ground, is through that tracking station. So once my job was done there, I was going to go back into Spain, and they said, well, you got to go back to New York instead of going to Spain. So I went back to New York, spent a few days there, and I was briefed in New York, and they said, well, look, you're not going to be stationed in Madrid. We decided to station you on that island off of Morocco there. I said, fine, So I went back. I had my apartment there, and I was stationed on that island. And I'm waiting, for the contraband where I can bring it back to New York. And I looked if you look directly to the west, there's nothing but the Sahara Desert out there. And south of Morocco, where the border is, I mean, there's piles of sand out there as tall as skyscrapers. Nothing lives out there. And I thought, well, my goodness, what have I got myself into? Surely they're not going to bring it through the Sahara. So, I'm waiting, and the pilot comes back in. He says, look, we're going to fly commercial to Johannesburg. And once we get to Johannesburg, we're going to go up into the interior of Africa. Well, that kind of stunned me because, I didn't expect to go in Africa for anything. I didn't know what was down there. So we took a commercial flight from Morocco in Johannesburg. And then when we got in Johannesburg, we got in some Jeeps in a caravan, and we went northeast towards the Indian Ocean, back down about where this old tracking station used to be. Now, I didn't go on the island. We stayed in Tanzania. But there was an abandoned airstrip in Tanzania. I presume it was built as a loading facility to bring the supplies out to the island in the Indian Ocean. That's what I believe it was for. But even it was abandoned. But it was being used by bush pilots, okay? By bush pilots. So when I got to that abandoned airport in Tanzania that supposedly served this defunct NASA tracking station, when we got to the airport, we flew out on bush plane into Rwanda and landed at Lake Kivu on a boat plane. Now, the first couple of times I did it, I stayed on the plane in the lake because someone's got to guard the plane. And the pilot, a boat would come out to him. He'd get on the boat. He'd go in to the shore. And from there, he would be picked up. So he did it we did it about 3 times. Now, on the last time that I did it, he brought back some duffel bags like soldiers carry. And it was packed. It was real heavy. And it felt like gravel was in these duffel bags. But on the 3rd time that I was moving these duffel bags, it was kind of dry rotted where the loop goes in. You put your hand at, and it tore open a little bit, and some diamonds fell out of it. Well, I picked the diamonds up. I put it back in the bag. I took some duct tape. I taped it up. So I know that I'm smuggling diamonds by the duffel bag full. And there was one bag that I'm sure was gold in it. It was only like about 1/3 of a way full, but the weight of it felt like it might be not diamonds, but gold, because it was extremely heavy. So my 3rd trip back from New York back to Lake Kivu, back through, Tanzania there. I was told that, hey, you're going ashore. Right about get a little closer to that Goma there, James, on the north part. Can you get a little closer there?
That's not in Rwanda, it looks like.
A little south of Gaza. Right there.
Okay.
That was a town that William lived in, but go back to Gomer. So that town's been Gomer there. I believe I came in at Gomer first because there's volcanoes north of there that some of the lava.
That one right there.
Yeah. Go back down to Gomer here.
Okay.
Part of Gomer was destroyed, but I came in at Gomer there, but I think I went back to the right to the other town. But first time I met William, he came down in a Jeep.
Rutledge.
William Rutledge, I mean. The first time I met him, he came down in a Jeep. The windshield was knocked out. There's bullet holes all over the Jeep. The muffler's gone. It looked like the Jeep had been through hell and back. And I thought to myself, oh, Lord, what have I got myself into? These guys are living off a tailgate of a Jeep trying to make a living. But I got in, he picked me up, and he brought me to his house. And we went into his backyard. He had a beautiful peacock back there, a bird. I looked at it. It was a beautiful backyard. And we sat in the backyard, and me and him talked. and he said, Jimmy, he said, or we would like for you, we have a bright future in the transportation industry, and we would like for you to join us. It's a good living. He gave me this kind of a fatherly talk, prep me up, want to give advice, which I took friendly. And so a black woman came out. This is his girlfriend. And the first thing I picked up on her, she's wearing Levi jeans. So that told me that she had access to Western wear. You just don't pick up a pair of Levi blue jeans that deep in Africa.
What year is this, Jimmy? Some people have been asking that in the chat.
This was about 74, James, by that time.
And this picture we're looking here, that looks predates 74.
That predates 74. That's when he worked. He was a Air Force tester. Now he's originally was in the Belgium Army, but now his mother, from what I understood, is Belgium. His father was an American soldier. All right, and he was too young for Korean War. But what he is there, he's a test pilot for the well, not for the military, but for a private company like I'm not sure if it was Boeing or Lockheed Martin. It's one of those companies there. But getting back to my story.
Wait, hold on a second, Jimmy. Michael, do you have any questions? Or you just
no, I'm just taking it all in.
Okay.
Just trying to do my best to not lose the time that's relevant to each piece. But
okay.
Well, getting back to my story, because it's going to all fall in once I get into the story to answer a lot of the questions here. This black female comes out, and the first thing I pick up on is the tag on her blue jeans says Levi. And he said, y'all want some beer? He said, and he looked at me and he said, well, at that time I'm like 17 years old, and I have a craving. I need some sugar. I need some salt. So I said, can you give me a Pepsi and can I have some peanuts? See, people from the South, they drink Pepsi Cola and they eat peanuts. They put peanuts in their Pepsi Cola. And that kind of, they kind of just looked at me and, they didn't down me anything. They just, they had never seen that before. So she comes back, she goes in the house, she comes back out with their beers, and I have my cola and some, peanuts, and I took a drink or two, then I put my peanuts in there. See, the salt and the peanuts replenished my nutrients because it's very hot in Rwanda. I'm used to the heat, but it's a different kind of heat. But I'm very used to the African heat because I grew up in the South. Okay, so that was the first time I met her. But
is this Leona Snyder?
That's Leona. She's the astronaut. Now, let me tell you.
Not the girlfriend.
That's his girlfriend also.
Oh, okay.
All right. Let me tell you who she is. Now, she's born in the Republic of Congo. She was born there. See, Congo and Rwanda come together at that lake. She's only few miles from where she's lives at. And come to find out, when she was young, she was educated in Europe, and then she came to the United States. Well, she ends up at Plum Island. Now, Plum Island is only a few minutes by boat from Camp Hero. And what she did at Plum Island, she was an infectious, she was a cellular biologist. In other words, she specializes in diseases. And I had gone over to Plum Island at one time from Camp Hero. I don't ever remember seeing her over there. But she was there during the time that I went over there. I was being trained in biological warfare. So I handled some of the infectious agents over there, in the lab. But I was only there for a very short period of time, just training. That's what she specializes in, is all these dreaded diseases from Plum Island. So what happened after I left Lake Kivu, I got back to the States. I went a couple more times over to Africa and back, smuggling the diamonds. Now, these diamonds, because back in the 70s, they had this thing going around about blood diamonds. Don't buy any diamonds from Africa because you're funding the wars over there. So while New York is a diamond capital of the United States, if you got married in the 70s and got a diamond ring, well, I was pretty much the one that carried that diamond to New York, where those jurors sold all that through De Beers diamond company. All right, so I smuggled all the diamonds in the 70s from Africa to De Beers Corporation. Now, back around 1970.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are diamonds really, are they rare and justified, the prices, or is that, what, do they corner the market? De Beers, do they corner the market?
De Beers cornered the market through what I was doing. If I had not been there, that company would have folded. The diamond industry would have folded. Now, since then, they're able to make synthetic diamonds. That was long after I was gone. But during that time period, De Beers was the most successful company in the mining business. But let me get on with the story. I ended up coming back to the States, and I went back out to Holloman Air Force Base for a while. That's when I met up with Jim Morrison. The Doors.
Wasn't his father a military general?
His father was an admiral, was a rear admiral. People didn't know that. And I used to hang out with Jim Morris. With Jim Morris, I learned to drive his Mustang, and Jim Morrison would, drink liquor while I would drive the Mustang. That's how I got to learn how to drive, was through him. And but I hung out at Holloman for a while, and it got around to about 1975, and I was contacted again by that group, and all I knew was that NASA was interested in me And I had not had anything to do with NASA since, ever since Ham died. And so they wanted me to go apply for a job at NASA. I didn't know what I was applying for. And so the day came for my interview. I went up to NASA. I sat down with them. They asked me a series of questions. And one of the questions they asked me was, do you believe in God? And, I'm a dual religion. I was born Catholic, but I take the religion of the Paiute, the Native American Paiutes on Nellis Air Force Base. And so after the interview, I didn't hear from them for about 2 weeks. And I get called back in and they said, well, you're hired. And come to find out, now all the astronauts before then was asked, do you believe in God? And every one of them answered yes. I did not know that William Rutledge was atheist. I did not know that the Snyder woman was atheist. I did not know that. All right, but because I took the religion of the Native American Paiutes, they said, well, you have the religion of the savage. You have the religion of the savage. So I was picked along with William Rutledge and that woman to the left. Now, the far man to the right, that's Gerald Ford.
So was he president? So I think this is what, 76?
That was around 74, I believe that picture was taken, because it was right after Nixon resigned. Now, my understanding of it was the Russians contacted Richard Nixon first, and they were wanting to do a joint mission. But what happened, Richard Nixon knew of the crashed spacecraft before he resigned in 1974. He knew that. But because of Watergate, he resigned and Gerald Ford was appointed to take his place. So that's a picture of Gerald Ford and Brezhnev and Snyder and Rutledge there, all together sitting, having the, they're discussing the joint mission. Now, so after I was hired, I had to go in for some additional brush up training.
Hey, Jimmy, I have a really good question. I know you're, but let me ask it real quick. So Ricky's asking, this is a question I'm thinking about. So it's 1974, and over here on the Wikipedia, it says Mae Jemison was the first Black female in space. That was September 20th of 1992. But here we see somebody in 1974.
It's a Black Ops mission, James. It's a Black Ops mission. It doesn't exist. What you're looking at to the left of William is the first Black female in space. She's been educated in the West. She's from the Congo. She's from the Congo. And she, right where the astronaut chimpanzees, the Air Force got those astronaut chimpanzees from the Congo. I believe William may have been one of the hunters that bagged these these astronaut chimpanzees. They were brought back, sold to the Air Force, and they were used as early test pilots for the space program. Okay. Now, let me get back to
And
my.
hold on, one last comment. And you can see right there's a Soviet Union flag right next to American flag. So at that time in the mid 70s, we were told that the Soviet Union was America's biggest enemy, right?
Yes, it's all a big show here, James. Let me get back to the story because we're never going to finish. I know you're interested, but we have many more interesting things coming tonight that pales this picture here. Now, I'm gonna go back. Where was I at before you kept questioning me
Well,
here?
we were talking about the Leona Snyder over there.
I when I got back to Holloman Air Force Base, they said, "Look, you need to brush up. You got to do some training in the swimming pool, underwater, wearing the astronaut suit." So I did a few weeks of working in the pool in the astronaut suit. That's the nearest that they could simulate working in space was in the pool. I did that for about 2-3 weeks, simulating what astronauts do in space. They had a special fit me for the suit. Every suit is custom built around the astronaut. So what happened was we're getting around to the year 1975. And right before the mission, William Rutledge was in training, and I'm not sure where William trained. I'm thinking it was around Vandenberg, but I'm not totally sure of it. But he trained separate from me. Okay? But it was unlikely. You know, you didn't know if you were going to come back or not from the moon. So they told him first he couldn't go home. And his sister called him. He had been gone for about a month or two. Nobody had heard from him. And his sister Joyce called him. And she told William, she said, "Our mother has died." And she wanted William to come home to Europe because they had to bury William's mother. And William couldn't leave because he was in training. And his sister got mad at him and hung up on him. You know, right before she told him, she said, "If you don't come to the funeral, I'm never going to talk to you again." So he was under a lot of pressure. And she hung up on him. He just finds out his mother's died. And a couple of days later, they asked him, what's going on. He said, "Well, my mother's died." And they reevaluated it, and they said, "Look, we're going to let you go for about a week. You need to take care, do what you need to do, but they really didn't want him to have contact, but because his mother died, they let him go for about a week." Well, instead of going back to Belgium, or excuse me, Paris, I think that's where his mother lived, was in Paris. His family's from Belgium. William shows back up in Rwanda, and he goes to his house, and his dog is dead. His dog curled up and died by his bedroom window. So the man has found his dog dead. He has also lost his mother. And his sister's mad as hell at him. She doesn't want to talk to him. So you can imagine the pressure that was on that gentleman when all this happened. And so he never showed it around me. Okay. So when I got to Vandenberg Air Force Base, they kept us separate because they wanted to make sure if one of us came down for code, it wouldn't affect each other one. So you had 3 astronauts. You had William Rutledge, you had Lenona Snyder, there was one Russian, Vladimir Morkov, General Vladimir Morkov. Now, that general allegedly should have died in 1967. He was a cosmonaut. Russia had a cosmonaut. The parachute didn't open on one of their spacecraft, and the spacecraft crashed and burst into flames. So the Russians staged the death of one of their, that's him to the left there, Vladimir Markov. They staged his death. Now that was in 1967. Williams' notes seem to indicate that the Russians knew of the spacecraft as early as 1966. So while we were busy on the front side of the moon picking up rocks, the Russians were busy sending probes back there during that time period. But come to find out, General Vladimir Markov, he was terminally ill with cancer. He was given about 8 months to a year to live. So he had terminal cancer at that time. So Russia volunteered him to be one of the cosmonauts on Apollo 20. Now, Apollo 20, I'm going to get to it now. When NASA shut down, after Wernher von Braun retired, after the Apollo 16, I believe he retired around Apollo 16. By Apollo 17 was a new director from NASA, if I remember right. But what they did, all these Apollo rockets were outdated by that time. They had already had on the drawing board Space Shuttle Columbia, what we would know as Space Shuttle Columbia. So when they shut down the Apollo production of the Apollo missiles, they turned that back over to the General Service Administration, and the General Service Administration turned it back over to the Air Force. So the Air Force ended up with all the Apollo rockets. Only thing an Apollo rocket was a modified ICBM missile with extra fuel tanks on it, James. So it went back into the Air Force's inventory.
Wow.
So they have like a production line, just like you have cars coming down production line. They just stop mass producing them. So there's plenty of spacecraft, booster rockets, engines, all this stuff laying around went to the Air Force. So what happened was when William Rutledge came in, they were taking these spacecraft, put them together. That some of them weren't even painted. Okay, some of those spacecraft weren't even painted, and they didn't want to paint them because it would make the paint to paint one of those spacecraft would run around 450 pounds of paint. So they didn't paint them. That was more fuel that they could carry rather than the weight of the paint. So a lot of the spacecraft were not painted. All right. So in August of 1975, William takes off in Apollo 20. With him, Snyder, and General Vladimir Morkov, they took off. Actually, Apollo 19 took off first. That was there was a guy in there named Reynolds. His last name was Reynolds. He was the commander of Apollo 19. Apollo 19 took off first. Apollo 20 took off second. And I was in Apollo 21. I took off last.
Okay, so this, I think this right here is
We
flight.
don't want to go to that document just yet. That's the end. That's one of the end doc. Don't go to that.
Okay.
Get out of that. Go back in if you want to, but not that document. Now, so by the time that I took off, I'm thinking there's 2 spacecraft ahead of me. We're sending 3 spacecraft together, but we're following each other. By the time that I got in orbit, Rutledge had already went down on the surface, and so had Apollo 19. I'm the last one going around the moon. But coming around the moon, I see a disabled spacecraft. And it's the limb and the spacecraft is together. The command module and the limb is still together. You have to separate them, and then you bring the limb down. This spacecraft there's no power to it, but it's rolling like a barrel. And when we pulled up beside it, I was thinking it was Apollo 19, but it wasn't. It had the markings of Apollo 19, but it wasn't Apollo 19. And I start feeling suspicious about, well, what's going on here? And it would take, I timed this spacecraft, it would take about 19 seconds before it could make a complete rollover. So it was turning real slow. There's no power to it. It hadn't been separated from the limb. So right off, I knew something wasn't right as far as the numbers to these spacecraft, 19, 20, and 21. You can't have 2 19s. It didn't make any sense. Again, there's no markings on the spacecraft because they weren't painted. But it should have been Apollo 19, but it wasn't. Now, I knew Apollo 20 had a sickle on it. That was the only thing that was painted. The Russians insisted that the sickle hammer be painted on that side of the spacecraft. This one did not have it. So that should have been 19, but it wasn't. So that told me there was more spacecraft involved than what was told to me.
So that's a Russian probe right there.
That's one of the earlier Russian probes. I don't want to get into that. Back out of that. Back out. All right. So the plan was for me to board the spacecraft, the derelict spacecraft. So we sat there for about 2.5, 3 hours. I was steadily counting the rotations of the craft. We have to maneuver our spacecraft close to it. We don't want to get bumped, but we want to get as close as we can to it. And the deal was that I had some extra propellant, canisters of extra propellant for this spacecraft. And I'm going to board it. So I spent about 2.5 hours looking at this from about maybe 50 feet from it. And I've got to get onto this craft. So what I did, I shot out a rope to it with a grappling hook. And I took the propellant. I've got it tied to the rope. The first rope I shot out was strictly for me. Strictly for me. All right. So when I shot the first rope out, the grappling hook caught part of the limb's lower gear, landing gear, and it rode me just like a spool of thread that you roll up, a spool that you roll the thread up on. It just pulled me into it where I could cling to it and get onto it. Then once I was on it, I got in there and I was able to uncoupling the propellant tank. And then the other astronaut shot another line over, that was tied to these propellants. And we did the same thing. It just wound that rope up like thread on a spindle. And it brought over the propellant. And I was able to secure the propellant, get it hooked up where we could blow the thrusters. So once I got the propellant hooked up, I'm back inside and I find 2 astronauts dead in there. And one of them had threw up in the suit. I presume that they died, they asphyxiated. Okay. When the limb and the command module together, it's very unstable. Okay. It's not balanced very well. And it had been modified with a new door on it, a hatch. Do you remember when the United States sent a spacecraft up to the moon and the Russians did some years prior to that, and they shook hands where the cosmonaut opened the door to the American capsule and they shook hands? It was in the newspapers. Your mic is muted, Michael. I saw you move your lips there.
Yeah, that was Apollo Soyuz.
Okay, well, that was a goodwill mission. That was all up front. But when they added that door, it made it unstable because it added more weight to the spacecraft. But when I was able to get in there and get it all hooked up, I was able to stabilize it from rolling. And once I was able to stop the roll, I left the bodies in the command module. And I got back into the limb. And I was able to bring the limb down and land on the moon. So that's how I got onto the moon. I didn't use the lander on the spacecraft I was in. I used the lander, the limb on the derelict spacecraft to come down.
And how old were you at this time, Jimmy?
I was around about 18 at that time. No, I'll take that back. I was around about 20 at that time. 20. 70, 76 was when the mission occurred. I was 20. But I came down, I'm coming down, I'm looking down, and I'm seeing a spacecraft about a mile from me. And I thought it might be Apollo 19, the other Apollo 19. So when I got down, I landed, went, unloaded the rover, got the rover unpacked, and got it set up, and rode out about a mile. And when I got closer to that spacecraft, it wasn't Apollo 19, it was a Russian spacecraft. Well, then it got even more confusing. What the hell is this Russian spacecraft doing on the backside of the moon? I've got one derelict one above me. That's not 19. And then I got another one on about a mile from where I land. That's is Russian. So instead of heading to the main wreck, the mothership, I went to see, what's going on. So when I got there to this Russian spacecraft, the hatch is ajar. That's not a good sign. And I crawled up the ladder. I got into this Russian spacecraft, and I have lights on my suit. And I mean, the whole inside that spacecraft, there was nothing but blood, massive amounts of blood. And when blood is, without gravity, it was all over the walls. It was on the floor. It was everywhere. It's like a bomb going off and blood going everywhere in zero gravity. So the whole inside was covered in blood. And on top of that, everything's tore up. They give you like rock hammers, like geologists use, when they go out in the field, pointed hammers to break these rocks open. Well, the whole inside was tore up. Like someone who took an axe and just tore the whole inside of the craft up. Wires hanging everywhere. Busted circuits. But I went over and I was able to fire the computer up. And I don't read Russian, but I knew the date on it didn't correspond with the mission. And I thought, I'm like at a crime scene. I don't know what's happened. There's blood everywhere. I'm in a derelict Russian spacecraft. So I got back out. I went back out, and I'm seeing footsteps, and they weren't the footsteps of an American. Their shoes are flat. Ours is rigid. So I followed the cosmonauts' footsteps. There was a crater adjacent to the to where he landed, and I went. We're not supposed to go down into the crater where it's dark, because when you get into the dark areas of the crater, it gets cold down there. Now you can either turn the power up on your suit to warm your suit, but on the other hand, you're draining your battery, your power pack. So I went down into it a short distance, and I mean, I was freezing. My legs were stinging from the coldness. But when I got down there, I found the cosmonaut. He was dead, and I grabbed him, and I dragged him up to the top of the crater where I could examine him into the light. He was probably about 80 feet down in the crater, in the dark part of it, before I found him. And when I got him up, I looked at him. His face shield is broken. And I examined him, and he was mummified. He was frozen stiff, and his suit was all tore up, like he had been struggling. I believe that there had to be more than one cosmonaut, but for some reason he went down into the crater. Okay, so I ended up leaving his body. I initially thought it was a crime scene. I thought, well, maybe the American astronaut and the cosmonauts got to fighting. Or maybe they went loco and the two cosmonauts went after each other. But I was sure I was at some type of crime scene because of the violent nature of the struggle. So I left there, and I'm heading towards the mothership. And before I got to the mothership, I see another spacecraft. That is Apollo 19. And when I got to Apollo 19, they, I tapped on the hatch. They went ahead and put their suits on, and they opened the hatch. They let me in. And once I got in there, we resealed the hatch on Apollo 19, and there is Evie. She's in there. She is naked, and she is laying on a table. And so they're examining her. And
is that Jimmy? Look at Michael's feed.
Well, she still had the tubes on her face. We're in the process of taking the tubes off. And I examined her. I touched her, and she is frozen solid. Her blood is, you can't push in on her skin. She is solid as a block of ice.
And Jimmy, was there an atmosphere in the craft, or is it all in?
Which craft are you talking?
The one that you're in right now, the Apollo 19, where this body is.
There's atmosphere in there.
Okay.
Now, she was taken out of, I'm sure she was frozen when she was taken out of the mother craft. But when she was in there, you could knock on her skin like wood. Just like you knock on a door, her skin was so hard you could not, it was not soft. She was like a block of ice. So they removed the tubes from her, and some yellow liquid came out. And so at that time, I my mission is to go to the craft. I'd already made contact with Apollo 19, and I'm thinking William and General Valdemar Markov, I'm thinking that they're at the Apollo craft. Excuse me, the mothership. I'm thinking they're in the alien craft. So I tell Reynolds, the commander Reynolds, I said, look, I've got to meet up with William. So they went ahead and put their helmets back on, and we opened the hatch. I got back out. And after they sealed the craft back up, they went back to examining her. Okay. I walked in on the examination. The examination continued after they resealed the craft. So from there, I'm going to go to the main spacecraft. When I get to the main spacecraft, see, you have road 1 and road 2. Road 2 is from the Apollo 19 craft to the spacecraft. And then road 1 is from Williams spacecraft to the foreign spacecraft. And you had road 3, which is from my spacecraft to the mother craft. So those are the 3 roads where our tracks are down there in the lunar soil. So when I get to road 1, I get there and I do not see William Rutledge. He has already been there and left. So you have so much air and so much power in your back seat. I decided to go on into the spacecraft. And when I went into the break, well, before I went into the break, I'm going to describe the shape and size of this spacecraft. This spacecraft, go to the main spacecraft, James, the big one. All right, back out. That spacecraft is 4.2 miles long, is 1/3 of a mile high and 1/3 of a mile wide. So we're talking about a very large spacecraft. It's cylinder shaped. There's all kinds of strange writings, hexagon, similar to pictographs, like what you see.
Yeah, I've got like a 3D model I could show here real quick. If you want to see it.
Fine, but let me go off my story, James.
Okay.
Because we have a lot to cover tonight. The break in the side of the craft is as high as Eiffel Tower is. If that gives you any kind of indication, just the break in the side of the craft. So I went in the side, and there's lunar soil in there. I presumed it looked like it, like sand on a beach when after a storm, it is smooth, So I'm thinking the soil just got in there and it got wet. Was my impression. It was real smooth. And I get into this craft and I'm walking around in it. And when I got to the size of the craft, I'm able to walk. I could do a 360. I could walk from the side on the inside. I could walk from the inside, walk upside down to the top, and walk back around. In other words, it had gravity inside the craft. That was the first thing I noticed.
Could you give an estimate of how old it might have been?
There have been some estimates. One estimate, the geologist, which is, I believe, the cosmonaut was a geologist. Either it was him or it was Rutledge. Either it's him or Reynolds. I'm not sure which one. I'm not sure if Reynolds is the geologist or was it the cosmonaut. The first estimate was 1.2 billion years. Now, that was based on the crater that it sat in. William Rutledge thought it had been there since the time of when the pyramids were built in Egypt. I don't know where he got that. I estimated 42,000 years because when I would channel Mona, Mona said 42,000 years. And I believe that she based that on the rotation of the Earth. I don't know where Mona comes from in space, but Mona said 42,000 years, Earth years. Okay. So not only does the inside of this craft have gravity, I go in there, I see some black triangular blocks. They look like little pyramids. They're made out of some type of ceramic. I thought it was similar to the ceramic the ceramic tiles underneath the space shuttle. But they're not flat, but they look like they're made out of some type of ceramic material, and they were slightly greasy, kind of oily, this yellowish liquid. It seemed like it was soaked in it, but it would come onto the glove, and it was oily because I could rub my fingers together and they would glide very easily. And then I saw vegetation that looked like, it's kind of like you have a garden and you have a freeze the night before and it wilts the plants. So I was picking up this vegetation and it looked like it had withered from the extreme cold, but it was perfectly preserved. And then when I looked onto the floor, it looked like some type of liquid had ran over the lunar soil and compacted down like you would on a beach. Like the waves going onto the beach, it makes the sand smooth. So I go through this craft and I'm climbing over some very large equipment. It turned out it was a rocket launcher. I believe that's what the two other smaller triangular spacecraft was launched from. There's the cigar-shaped one, and then there's two triangular craft that are out beside it, two other wrecks. Okay.
Jimmy, I've got a quick question. So you entered into this derelict craft with there was a hole the size of the Eiffel Tower. Now, is there actual an atmosphere on the moon? Because I've heard from, I don't remember where, but it's there is a slight breathable atmosphere.
I'm getting to that. The cosmonaut I'm going to back up a little bit here. I want to inject something. The cosmonaut went in there. He found he called it, and this is a slang term, but on the wall it looked like a hair dryer. Like you go to a public restroom and you wash your hands, and then you put your hands underneath this dryer and it dries it off. So this box is hanging off the side of the hull, but when you get to this box, you step on these two metal plates. And when you step on the plates, you put your hand underneath this dryer, and you're instantly teleported to another part of the ship. Now, we're not talking an elevator here. You're teleported. You vanish and you end up in another part of the ship. So that's how they move, is through this teleport system. But if you read William's notes, William says that you can hear a bang when you teleport. Now, because there's no atmosphere, you can't hear anything. You're not supposed to hear anything in space because there's no air. You have nothing to bounce off your eardrums, okay? If there's no air, you should not be able to hear sound in space because there's no air to vibrate your eardrum. William said he heard air. He could hear it even inside his helmet. Now, the reason I know there's air on the moon, about a quarter of a mile from the spacecraft, there's a city. Now, I believe that when this spacecraft crashed, the occupants in this craft, they cannibalized the craft. They took parts of beams out there, and they probably had machinery in there. And because there were mats down in that crater. And I believe that they took parts out of that spacecraft. They built what we call the city. Some people call it the junkyard. I think the Russians call it the junkyard and we call it the city, or it's either vice versa. So if you hear me say the city or the junkyard, it's basically the same thing. But what you're seeing is parts taken out of that craft, and they're trying to build a makeshift place where they can live. Now, since I've been in that little city, and you go down into the underground part, we have a small reactor there, a small modular reactor. So there's power in the underground part, and there's air there. Now, on Earth, when you send somebody into the ocean real deep, they have to go into a decompression chamber, or you'll get what you call the bends. And you have to slowly raise the pressure up to as normalized, or you come with the bends. Now, on the moon, if you get down in the craters, you ever seen these people, they walk around town, they got a little canister on their hip, they may have CPOD, smokers, but they need a little booster. So they carry a little tiny air bottle and they breathe through a tube. You know what I mean? You can actually, after you decompressed, you can take a booster tank and put it on your hip, run 2 little hoses into your nose, and walk around on the moon. There's a little bit of air, but it's down in the very lower parts. See, air is heavier. It's going to settle in the lower parts of the crater. And every time there's been activity on the moon, people have reported seeing strange lights in these craters. So there is life on the moon. There's tall grays. I've encountered them on prior missions. Apollo 18, they had some astronauts became affected. So I've been to the moon prior at the Apollo 18 site where those 2 astronauts died that were infected some years earlier.
And what about the parasites?
There are parasites in the dust. They look very much like a slug does. If you get into a swamp, you get slugs on you. Leeches is what I'm trying to say here.
But that would mean that there's an ecosystem there. There's life forms. Right?
There's life forms there, but it seems to be internal, maybe in the lava tubes, deep down in it. The surface is barren, but there's parasites that look like jellyfish. They're translucent, but they're like leeches. Once they get on your skin, I had 2 of them on me at one time. I had to go to Holloman. They treated me with chemotherapy, and that's how these leeches fell off of me, is through chemotherapy. So there are parasites in the dust, and there's also bacteria from these creatures in these ruins. Which we have no known immunity to. Now, I'm going to get back to the ship because we got a little bit off here. When I got into the ship, I went into the fort section where the pilot sits, where Mona was removed from. And I took the flight computer, I dismantled and removed the flight computer from her spacecraft. All right, that's been transported back to Earth with me and Mona. I'm going to get to Mona in a little bit here. But while I'm in the spacecraft, I'm looking around when I'm taking this computer out. And I'm coming back down and I'm seeing more of these plants. They seem to be alive and they seem to be growing. It's like vegetables that are 100 feet high. I presume that these plants that are growing in there, there's trays below them, and they drip a yellowish, oily substance in these trays, and they collect there's a pump in there, and it goes into the tank. So these plants have been in there. We call them vampire creepers. Now, William's the one that named it the vampire creepers. When he was in there, he put a camera up, and he went in there, and when he left out, that camera filmed all to the next day when William went in the second day. And it wasn't till the second day that they were, going back through the films that they realized these plants were moving. They do move. They move very slow, but the plants are alive. So that's why they call them vampire creepers. Now, what happened was at some point, I never did meet up with William because I don't know where he went down at. And I have only so much oxygen in my tanks to get back to my craft. All right. So what happened on the way back when I left the spacecraft to go back to my craft, I stopped back at Apollo 19 where Reynolds is at. And the hatch is open, which is another bad sign. And I went in, and both men are missing. Both astronauts are missing. And Mona, when I left, she's on the examination table. Well, Mona has gotten back into a bunk or to a hammock, and she's gone back to sleep. But what had happened, because this was filmed, what had happened, Reynolds uploaded all this to the computer. But what had happened when I left, when I was there the first time, Mona started to unthaw. And she got to the point where she was limp, and they turned her over to examine her. And they thought they heard blood moving in her veins. And then they thought that she had made a moan. But when they turned her back over, her eyes opened. You know, they had already removed the tubes from her face. And her eyes opened, and she became startled. She jumped off the table, and there was some mist that occurred. I don't know where the mist came from, but Reynolds and the other astronaut was able just enough in time to put their helmets on, and then they passed out. And the camera that Reynolds had on his suit when he was passed out, Mona leaned over and was looking at him while he was unconscious, laying on the floor of the Apollo spacecraft. Okay, so what Mona did after the helmets were on, of course, she didn't put them on. They were Reynolds and other astronauts who put their own helmets on. She went back out, and I presume at this point, and this is from what I understood of it, William and the cosmonaut had doubled back, and Reynolds and the cosmonaut got there before I did, and they went in, and they were the first ones that found Mona in there. But what had happened was, before they found Mona, and I'm not sure, but Mona had William had collected some samples the day before from the spacecraft of this yellow liquid that was, they call it angel angel tears, I believe is what they call it.
That was a vampire tears.
No, I believe he called it. No, they called it Golden Tears. I'm sorry. They just made up the name. They called it Golden Tears, this yellow substance. Now, what's unique about this yellow substance is back in 1947, during the Roswell crash, they examined one of the extraterrestrials, and when he was being dissected, they found this yellow liquid, kind of like um, slime or this yellowish stuff in the back of its mouth. It was also yellowish. And during the 1947 crash, when the soldiers came upon the craft, there was two triangular craft that took off. And William said that he read William read the autopsy report, and William also read the report, but the report seems to indicate that the two craft outside where the maiden craft is, that those two other small triangular craft were the ones that were at the Roswell crash. That's what William thought. So this is just conjecture. William thought the two craft that are on the moon were the two craft that came down to Roswell on a rescue mission, but that never did recover the remains. So what had happened, William went in there with the cosmonaut, and they find Mona there, but she's already gotten a hold of the golden tears, and she's drank it. It may be some type of nourishment for her. And because there was little to no oxygen, she went back to sleep. Okay, she went back to sleep in the spacecraft. And Reynolds, and the other astronaut, is gone. And William and the cosmonaut can't figure out where Reynolds is at. So they drive back to Apollo 20 and report back in that they can't find the crew of Apollo 19. So they get some sleep. NASA's going, well, not NASA, Mission Control is going to work on it during the night. They'll brief them in the morning. So the next morning, William goes, they explore the two smaller triangular craft adjacent to the main craft. Now his findings are exactly the same as mine. I examined the closest one from the craft. It may be 120 meters wide and maybe 600 meters long, and it's triangular. You enter into the back of it by the what would be the propulsion system through a round hatch. That's not the craft I'm talking about, James. Go into the other smaller craft, the pictures that I sent you, if you would. Get out of that. Go back to the pictures I sent you earlier tonight.
Okay, well, just tell me. I don't know which.
Just keep scrolling through.
Go back. Oh, that's not that one. Okay.
Go and those pictures there. Just keep scrolling through them.
Okay.
There. Stop. Do you see that thing that's hanging out on that top right one? Well, that's the nose cone with the smaller triangular craft. And that's probably William in the back of it there, on the back of the.
So who made that craft?
I believe those two smaller craft were inside the bigger craft. I think those were scout craft that was launched prior to the crashing. The main craft was losing power. I believe they got into that one and flew it alongside the main one till it went down. But when I went into the smaller craft, you go into the back, and there's a tunnel like in the back of it, and there were like these holes that would drop off, maybe about 6 inches wide, about 8 inches deep, and there were dead insects in these holes. I believe it to be locusts or grasshoppers. Locusts is what I would say. See, those are all alien ruins there you're looking at. Some type of underground base. I wasn't able to get in that one, but I was able to get into the spacecraft. But I say about 60 feet of a tunnel in the back of it is where these insects were at. And then when you climb through it, you go into a bigger room. There's seats in there like bleachers. And then you crawl up another tunnel in there and you come out in the nose part of it. And in the nose of it, there's no instruments. There's just a chair in there. I believe it's flown by telepathic thought. There's no gauges in that craft. So it's flown telepathically. The hull is the engine. Okay. So it's powered by thought.
Was it also alive too?
If the occupant is alive, it's alive. It's flown by it's flown by thought. It's all telepathic to fly this thing. Now, off towards the front of it, blue ways back behind the flight room, or where the pilot would sit, there's another room. I couldn't get into it. There was a round hole, maybe about 10 inches diameter. There's no scenes on it. It looks like it was poured, like it's molded. So there's no metal panels. You can't find any panels or rivets in this craft. But in the this other room, side room, there's bodies in there like they've been butchered. Heads, torsos, legs, human remains, like a laboratory of some site.
And that's what causing those cattle mutilations.
Well,
humans.
I do know in the 1947 Roswell crash, one of the things that made everybody quiet, they also found in the wreckage human remains. They were cut up like you would use a laser. There was human torsos and heads and legs and hands, like they're dissecting the body. So this craft here, what was in it was similar to the Roswell crash, like it was collecting body parts. Now, I don't know why. I don't know if they're cannibal or if they just collect it for scientific reasons. But there was humans that were cut up in that craft. And William Rutledge had a panic attack. He absolutely panicked in there and the cosmonaut was the one that got him under control. So it freaked William out very bad.
How old were the body parts? I mean, if the ship's 42,000 years old, I mean, were the body parts pretty fresh?
Well, see, that's the $64 question. If the main craft went down 42,000 years ago and the Roswell crash was in 1947, who knows if these craft were operating? I believe Williams seems to think that these craft were the original two that was seen at Roswell as the military, as the Air Force pulled up, two triangular craft took off into the sky. Now, William thinks that those were the two craft involved. I can't tell you. I can't tell you how old the bodies are in it. Like I said, you got a geologist saying 1.2 billion years for the big craft. And then you have Williams saying, well, he thinks it's been there since the pyramid times. And then me, I'm channeling, and I don't know how, what Mona told me was 42,000 Earth years. So maybe those craft, maybe they have been there 42,000. Maybe these craft here flew to 1947, and after that they might just parked it. I don't know. So getting back, after I had explored that craft, I did try to get into that underground complex to the other side, but wherever, I could never figure out how to get in. I'm sure if I dug, we had some equipment that we dug around it. I'm sure I could find a hatch to get into it. It's just covered up by the lunar soil. Okay. But what happened was, getting back to Rutledge and Commander Reynolds, and this is before I could find either one of them. William went back into the main mother craft, and when he was getting samples of the golden tears where this plant was dripping this liquid into these glass bottles, well, William was filling up these two bottles of this liquid, these golden tears. A glove fell out of the vine, and it was William's glove was white and black. This was white and gray, and it had some numbers on it. But it turned out that was Reynolds' glove, and it had blood on it. So at some point, Reynolds re-enters the main craft, and he ends up dying in there, or either is attacked in there. They never did find his body or the other astronaut's body. So Reynolds, so what happened was, time is up. There's not enough oxygen left or power in the batteries. It's time for William and Vandenberg to go get in the spacecraft, take off. That is the actual location. I have the longitude and latitude of that wreck. I'll try to give them to you later tonight if I can find it. But
this is on the dark side of the moon?
The dark side. But anyway, I'm getting back to my story. They take off, but what had happened, they refilled one of the bottles with the golden tears. But before he takes off, they sit about an hour in the spacecraft while they talk to mission control. And William seems to think that the Russians and the Americans got into a bit of a conversation there. But what happened was they ordered William to leave the bottle of golden tears on the moon. He's not to transport the golden tears back to Earth. They were very frightened of a germ like an epidemic. So it was determined by the scientific team on Earth not to bring back golden tears because it was considered a biological agent to leave it. But they didn't.
Well, but they did, though, Jimmy.
They didn't follow orders.
Okay. Yeah.
And what had happened, they brought the bottle of golden tears into the Apollo 20 limb, and they blasted back up, and they got back in orbit. They were able to meet back up with the command module, and once they linked back up, they all got into the capsule. And so you have Snyder, Vladimir is in there along with William, and this is a secret, okay. And so what happened? This cosmonaut, when they all got back up into the command module, Snyder had to examine him, and because she's an infectious disease specialist, so they all had to get naked and examine one another for any signs of any rashes or anything. And it turned out that this cosmonaut, that's when they found out that he had terminal cancer.
Which one?
You can't stay on that. You have to flip.
Okay.
You have to flip the page. Just keep scrolling.
Okay.
Right there to top left.
Oh, that's right. You were saying that earlier. But
all right, that guy there is the one that supposedly died. The cosmonaut. He's the one that supposedly died in 1967. He's the one that had the terminal cancer, and that's when Snyder examined him. And what it was, he confided in both of them. He says, and he was glad that he went on the mission, that the mission he wanted to know before he died, what was it like on the moon? All right, so what had happened, he wanted to drink the golden tears. And so they ended up, all three made a pact. So they took the bottle and they opened it. And it floats the liquid floats in the spacecraft, and they all drank the golden tears. And after all three of them had consumed that liter bottle of the golden tears, they jettisoned the bottle out of the craft. I'm not sure if they had to put their suits on to open the hatch up, but they ended up getting rid of the bottle, getting rid of the evidence. But after they consumed it, and I'm going by what William wrote, he said he felt kind of strange when he did it. He said he felt like he could read the mind of Snyder and the cosmonaut, and then the cosmonaut said something similar, that they could read each other's thoughts without speaking. Now, that was the first odd thing that they reported. And then they said they felt kind of a tingling going through their body, like an electrical tingle, you know. And so this went on for a while. This kind of an unusual feeling, telepathically, you know, they could hear each other's thoughts. But what had happened when they got back to Earth, they splashed down in the ocean, and there was a submarine. I think it was the USS Fish. I believe that's the name of the submarine. Now, that submarine had ballistic missile tubes, like you load the ballistic missiles in it. And what the government had done, they had taken the ballistic missiles out of 3 of those tubes, and there was furniture in those tubes, like a cock, examination table, in one tube. In another tube, they had the racks, you know, where they sleep in. They even had a VCR in there and some magazines. But when the spacecraft crashed down, the submarine surfaces, the frogmen came up to the side of the capsule. They tied a rope onto it, and it was winched into the tube of this ballistic tube, and then they pumped the water out, and then they closed the hatch. Okay. Once they had him inside the spacecraft in the USS Fish, they set course for Antarctica. So for several days, while they were in the craft, they're being examined, and they're, you know, they have magazines in there, and they're being interviewed, and they're basically gone into isolation because, like I said, they came in contact with an alien being. And when they got to Antarctica, there was even a backup plan. If they were infected, they were going to set off a nuke and incinerate the ship, everyone in it. Of course, they weren't any rashes or outbreaks. once they went through their quarantine period. So Antarctica is where they went. They stayed there maybe about 2 weeks or so till they were sure that they were not infected or carried anything. But what William had did when William was in there in the alien spacecraft, William took some seeds from the vampire creeper, and he took the seeds and he put it into a pocket of his space suit. He never told anybody that he had seeds from the vampire creeper. And they never checked his pocket for anything. They just simply took his suit and quarantined it. Now, when I came back a couple of days later, and the same thing is repeated for me, except one thing. I have Mona with me. I took Mona. I was ordered to bring Mona back. And the only thing I can recall of my trip back is that sometime during the trip, and I believe it once she got oxygen, she came back alive. And the only thing I remember is looking in Mona's eyes. And Mona, could you bring her picture back up, James? I need to show you something.
Sure. What kind of that?
The picture where she looks kind of dark in the face. Not that one.
Which one?
There, right there, to left bottom. Well, the left, right there to the far right. That, to go to the other one. That picture there. See that one to the left?
Mm-hmm.
Now go to the right, one picture up. To the far right. Far right, James.
Oh.
Do you see her eyes there?
It looks like the eyelids are closed.
Her eyes are open. See the whites of her eyes?
Mm. Okay, so if it's like a big, long,
slanted. Do you see the eye to the left? Look like it's got 2 pupils.
To the left, like over here. This one here.
No, James. Go back to the first picture.
Okay.
Stay on the first
I don't
picture.
know which one. This one here.
Okay, stay on those pictures. See those little spots in her eyes?
Like that right there.
Look to the other eye. Look, she's got more than one eye. See those pupils? See the pupils in her eyes?
Is that another one there?
There's one. Go down below it. There's one there. James, don't jerk the screen so much. Don't jerk the screen.
I'm trying to zoom in.
Okay, I know, but you're jerking the screen too much. She's got more than one pupil in her eye. She has maybe 3, 4 pupils in each eye.
So does that mean she's like an insect?
Well, that's a good question about the insects. I think because she communicates with locusts, like a fly has many eyes. I don't know if I'm saying it right. She doesn't have to turn her eye any particular way. She's able to see out of each pupil. She can see spectrums of light that we can't see. Okay. But she has several pupils on her eye. She has one eye, but she has several pupils in there. All I remember was that she came to, And she got right up in front of my face and she looked me in the eye. And that's the last thing I remember. So I have no, and it's very unusual for me not to have a memory, because every time I worked at Camp Hero, they would tase me with a taser, but my memories always came back. I'm one of these guys that no matter how you tase me, sooner or later, my memory comes back.
Wow, because they thought you wouldn't remember anything.
Well, I'm very unique. You can tase me, disorient me, but it always comes back. But for some reason, I have no recall of my trip back, and she is very much awake in that craft. But when I get back to Earth, what I did was I'm in my suit, and I decompressurized the spacecraft. That much I knew, and because you wear your helmet when you're descending, going down through the atmosphere to the ocean. And I believe that she went back to sleep when we were on the surface. And then because I'm on my oxygen in my spacecraft, my air in my spacecraft, in my suit. I'm in my suit. I have my own air. There's no air in the spacecraft. So she's asleep. And they, like I said, the frogmen come out. They attach a rope to the capsule. They wheeled me into the ballistic tube on the submarine. And the same procedure is repeated, except it's just me and the other guy, the other astronaut that was with me from Apollo, the Apollo mission that I was on.
And did they also take back Mona Lisa?
They took Mona Lisa, and they also took the computer that I retrieved. I retrieved the computer, the flight computer, and I retrieved some of the lunar soil, which is no big deal. Basically sampling around, by the crater, with some additional samples that I took. I had maybe a little bit of the vegetation and a couple of these 6-7 inch triangular ceramic pyramid things that I took with me back. But an interesting thing occurred once it was, it was sure that I was, not contaminated, because I also was taken to Antarctica. I was eventually brought back to Area 51 and debriefed. But I was told that Mona was at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. That's where she was being stored at. But they had a fire out there, and they had to move her. I'm not sure where she went. She was at Jet Propulsion Laboratory in the underground there. Now, a surgeon a few years ago was going to operate on her, and when he put the scalpel on her, he was electrified to death. He died being electrocuted. And I believe that she's able to store energy like an electrical eel, but the surgeon died instantly when he attempted to do an autopsy on her. But she's not dead, but she seems to go into a hibernation, a real deep sleep. Now, that very top of her head there, where you see that bit of mud there or lunar soil there, there's an orifice. There's an orifice there that opens. That's her third eye, and it flashes just like you have a camera, an old bulb camera. They would flash. She communicates by light.
Oh, here's another one.
Yeah, that opens and it flashes a light, a very intense light.
What color light?
It's as bright as a camera with the flash of a camera. It's short burst, but the light is telepathic in nature. I believe that she's somewhere between India and Asia. Some of the Buddhist temples have this third eye, Now, there's a report around 1802 or 1803. There's some fishermen in Japan reports a strange woman that was in a craft that washed up off of the coast of Japan, about where we know where Fukushima is now, where they have there's a mountain there. They have a lot of UFO activity in Japan. The Japanese fisherman, the woman carried a strange box that had some symbols on it. She couldn't speak their language, and so they towed her back out to sea. They thought it was an omen, and then she floated a while. She came back into another village, which was where Fukushima is. But I believe that she has come to Earth before, possibly. I believe she's of Asian descent. I believe that the Chinese, now that the United States is not on good terms with Russia, I believe the Chinese would be the next ones to go in there. And I want to remind some of these CEOs that's in charge of Boeing and Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and some of these other aerospace companies. We bury a secret very deeply to protect our companies, our investors who invest in these companies. But I do believe it's time that the veil of secrecy be lifted, because if we don't get our act together and go back to the moon, we're going to have Chinese astronauts crawling all in that craft. And that craft is mostly unexplored. We have inventions in there that we can advance our civilization through. So if you are a CEO of one of these companies or know of the CEO, they really need to get their act together. If they're interested in talking with me, I'm not interested in doing any lectures on the open circuit. I don't care about writing a book or making a movie. All I'm saying is that if you want to talk to me, you can contact me through James Rink. But we need to start getting ready to mount a mission back to the moon, because if we don't, the Chinese will. And we don't know what is in that craft, what type of weapons or inventions that they could come out with.
So Jimmy, I was watching a video recently from John Lear, rest in peace, where he mentioned that we were told specifically to get off the moon, and we told the ET that we still have five Saturn V rockets that we wanted to utilize, and they said, okay, go use a few of them and get off of here. So, what do you have any information? Have you heard anything like that?
I had a tall gray that approached me on the moon back during Apollo 18 mission when I went in to investigate that. The Apollo 18 was attacked. The rover was turned over. The flag was torn down. So I did come across that ET, and he told me that this was his area and he did not want anyone on it. And he asked me to leave, and I explained to the ET that we didn't know anybody was there, that we didn't know we were trespassing. But the ET, just wanted not to have any contact with humans. So that was told to me. I simply relayed it, and I guess that leaked out into what you heard, but that was really directed to me.
And you can confirm that the planet is round. We don't live in a dome, and the moon is not a hologram. It's all real.
It's round and it's all real. And some of the things you hear, James, is just so ridiculous. It goes back that you have a lot of people who are mentally unstable, and they tend to try to drift into circles where they can be accepted. And but I've been at this ever since I was a little child. I was taken when I was 5 years old from my parents and brought to Area 51, and I was raised. And that right there that you're looking at is kind of a joke. When William got to Alaska, the agricultural department is saying, well, where you've been. And to the right, you can see that he claims he's been to the moon. And then you have the general saying, yeah, they've been to the moon, And that's kind of a joke. But that's the reason I forward that. That's an official U.S. document that we have William Rutledge and General Vandenberg claiming that they didn't bring any produce back from the moon.
Oh, I see. So technically they really didn't need to sign a document.
No, he just William having a little fun, but
okay,
I thought that was unusual because we're trying to build a paper trail.
1976.
Of William. We know he was in the Belgium army, and but like I said, somebody at JPL or maybe Area 51. Maybe you need to come forward and say, yeah, this is real, and get some of these CEOs from these aerospace companies. Let's get them online and explain what's going on, because the Chinese are going to have their meal. I mean, they're going to take over the United States. United States is slipping very, very badly in the space race right now, James. And
but what if they actually are not? What if it's all clandestine running through Space Force? Which, by the way, we were talking about earlier about Vandenberg, but now that's actually not an Air Force base, but actually a Space Force base.
Well, James, look at the who's running Space Force. It's a transvestite in a dress. So we're the laughing. Space Force is the laughing stock of the world right now, with a transgender in a dress over Space Force. See, they want to dehumanize these young astronauts. Okay, and who knows? What are you going to do when they land on the moon? You going to have two gays kissing one another, or taking their vows on the moon, or putting a rainbow flag up on the moon?
Well, the Grays would probably come out and tear that up. I mean, they don't care about that.
Well, we don't need to get a rainbow flag on the moon, guys. What we need to do is get our act together, get some CEO. There was a time I worked a little while with under Howard Hughes, and that was a day CEOs took charge. Now you have everybody pandering to these political parties, but one of the things I knew when I was growing up is not when you see a politician, go run and hide. And these CEOs of these aerospace companies, don't worry about who's in power. Worry about your company. Worry about your investors, and concentrate on being yourself.
So Jimmy, were you the one that said that Howard Hughes helped build out a lot of our underground complex? So when he died, because it was all part of his biometric scan to access these facilities, so they cloned him out to keep, because they found it was cheaper to clone them than to try to change all the locks.
James, I never said that.
Okay.
And what you're hearing is basically propaganda that leaks in. A lot of that's from the Church of Scientology. They have gotten up there with Camp Hero, those Montauk Boys, and a lot of this that you're hearing is the sci-fi books that L. Ron Hubbard wrote before he died. Just don't believe in it. Go with people who are like me, who are telling the history rather than echoing the history.
All right, Jimmy. So we're looking for a sponsor. You could always donate to my 501c3, healingsoulsurvivors.org. If you enjoyed this video, we are looking for you, or Jimmy's, well, I guess both of us, we are looking for a sponsor. If you happen to know somebody that wouldn't mind putting how much money we need, probably what, Jimmy?
James, I'm not going to put a dollar on it. All I'm saying is that this involves the major aerospace companies. We need a major aerospace company to come forward where we can sit down in private, or either on Skype or Zoom, and have a talk. And as I said, William Rutledge, if they're really interested, this man can be he can be found. These pictures are not made up; they're real, and we need to start looking at the future because these big companies are going to be replaced. Uh, the Chinese and Russians have no use other than just to copy your technology and get rid of you. They don't want these big companies to compete with them. They simply want to take your technology and put these CEOs and all these aerospace companies out of work and make them history.
Oh yeah, certainly we could go down that road, but it's a long conversation. Hey, so Jimmy, the goal is to get a hold of some of these vampire tears, liquid, the golden tears. So because apparently he has healing properties, right? Because that Vladimir guy was healed of his cancer.
Another thing, when the William and Snyder, the other female astronaut, came back, they went back to Africa. Now she's Tutsi, and they had a violent uprising going on in that part of the country, and soldiers came to the house and they took them, and she was shot, and then he was shot. They were executed. Now, during the night, William woke up and he had dead bodies laying all over him. And the last thing William remembers is that they put him in front of a firing squad, and they didn't even give him a blindfold, and they shot him. He said he felt the bullet go through his body, and he hit the wall behind him, and the bits of the brick flew up and hit him in the back. So he felt blood coming out of his head, and then that's the last he remembers. And when William got up during the night and dug himself out from the dead bodies, and because there was about a dozen soldiers that had guns on William when they shot him. And when he walked home and he got to this house, there was Lenora Snyder, or should I say Lenora Rutledge by that time, because he married her. She was by the sink, and she had taken her blouse off. She was washing blood off of her blouse. See, they were both shot at separate times in front of the soldiers that took them from their home. They were both executed. So after, they went ahead and escaped from the region because the soldiers thought they were dead. They escaped. And they made contact with the Russian. And the Russian he was cured of cancer. He was cured of terminal cancer. And the Russian seems to think that the golden tears, not only did the golden tears cured him of terminal cancer, it also brought William and Lenora back to life. Now, there's no more golden tears because they drank it in the spacecraft. But let's get back to the spacesuit. William got to keep his spacesuit. He took it home with him. And guess what was in the zipper? Was the vampire seeds. So if I know William, I believe that somewhere out in the jungle we have some vampire creepers that are growing, and that he is probably producing his own golden tears on Earth. So
it's very likely that William Rutledge might be a 20-year-old man at this, and with Schneider.
Well, he's able to regenerate himself after death. The only other person I ever knew that was Christ. So apparently, Mona was drinking this stuff. She's
So
frozen solid
yeah,
like
so,
ice cube. She comes back. Go ahead.
well, that means if this Mona Lisa being is over 42,000 years old, or then very likely William might have a much longer lifespan than a typical human.
I would say I would say right now William would have to be studied along with Lenora. Um, the plants, vampire creeper plants would have to be removed and brought in for study. Um, remember, they did not want that plant on Earth. And I just cannot see William not growing those plants, those seeds. I can't see him not doing that. Um, but if he's able to regenerate his cells, I mean, he's using it, drinking this golden tears to regenerate his body somehow. But right now, I would say that an international effort should be put forth to go to Africa and track William down, because you know William's the type of person you could put him in a tuxedo and bring him to a fancy Washington party. It doesn't impress him. Guys like him are used to the bush. He's probably doesn't have any more family, and he's gone back to living in the bush. I also want to remind you that if you watch the movie Congo, it's based on smugglers who go to the ancient city of Zaire, and they go to King Solomon's mines. They get diamonds, and there's this ape that can communicate with an arm translator on its arm. Okay, it can type in and talk through a translator. Um, so what I'm saying is that that film is based loosely off of what was going on during the time that I was smuggling. Um, I don't believe there's a chimp running around with an armband on, but I do know that the astronaut chimpanzees are from the Congo, and right around where the volcano, prior to that volcano erupting, I have been to that mine there pulling diamonds out of that mine. So the movie Congo is loosely based off of what was going on during my smuggling era, and
All right. So is it Dr. Jose Delgado? And he wrote a book about it where they put electrical implants inside the brains of apes and were able to stimulate it for mind control purposes. And so, of course, that research was utilized on humans, but it doesn't. The mind control doesn't seem to work on everybody. So that's the good news.
well, Ham, the chimp that I took care of, he knew sign language. He was very limited, but he knew sign language. Trying to think of the name of that movie they made about what was the name of that movie?
Coco, remember Coco the gorilla?
No, that's nowhere near it. They made a movie about chimpanzees from the Air Force that are being irradiated. I can't remember the movie, but basically the chimpanzee knew sign language. Um, but
All right.
that's based loosely on some of the chimpanzees that I worked with or used to work with.
Thank you. All right. Well, quickly, I know Ricky. Actually, you've been asking some really good questions. Of course, a lot of people have been asking really good questions. But Ricky says, "Did the illegal contraband proceeds go to fund the secret space program?"
That's a good question. To be honest with you, I believe some of it may have. Uh, they certainly believed in themselves. They believed in the mission. Um, there is no congressional funding for these things. Um, so yes, I believe it did. I believe it did do it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And another quick question for Ricky was the movie Firefox with Clint Eastwood. Guys, we got to see that one. Stealing from a top secret craft from the Russians. Are you familiar with that one, Firefox?
I can tell you that some of the thought was taken from alien technology. Um, I believe that Howard Hunt made a movie. It was called Ice Station Zebra. Now, this starred Rock Hudson in it. Um, there was two movies that Howard Hunt had compulsive disorder, uh, disability. He was, and there ain't but two movies that he played over and over and over when he closed up his filming room, and that was Ice Station Zebra. The other one was another movie that starred John Wayne, where John Wayne played Genghis Khan, but that was filmed not far from the Nevada test site. All those movie stars came down with cancer from the radiological fallout in that area. So, but getting back to Firefox, I believe it ties in with some of the alien stuff that the Russians probably were trying to adapt some of that to a supersonic plane. I believe it's probably some truth to it.
All right.
Next question.
How many movies was it based off of your life experience, Jimmy? Do you have any idea?
James, I've caught over 3 dozen. Anything from John Rambo, almost all the John Rambo movies except maybe one is based on me. And there's other movies, Alien 1 and 2 are based off of me.
Predator.
In fact, the director of Predator lives only about 40 miles from where I lived. Go ahead.
Were you in the Titanic movie too?
I've been on the Titanic, but that was to rob the safe.
Okay.
That was basically that was what kind of turned me against Camp Hero. They lost power, and during the 2 hours they lost power, the ship sunk. So that was
So Camp Hero caused it to sink.
Well, Camp Hero lost power to their computers. They lost a signal, and by the time they got the computers back up, that Titanic sunk. They were supposed to be offloaded, and but we were there simply to rob the safes. Back then, people traveled with their money, and Camp Hero was running out of money during that time period. James.
All right, let's call it. This is plenty long. Thank you, audience, who managed to stick through this for 3 hours. Maybe we can try to get the transcripts up for people that might get a little intimidated for sticking with it for this long. And I thank you all, and I thank you, Jimmy, for coming on here.
I enjoyed it, James. Like I said, if anyone has any questions, just contact James. Again, I'm not going to talk to you if it's just a random question. I'll answer any question, but I'm strictly am talking tonight because I'm looking for corporate sponsors. But I will answer any question through James that pertains to what you want to know.
Right. Well, I do have a friend. His wife was one of like the head accountants for Lockheed. Maybe we can see if we can set up a call.
Well, it would certainly be in the interest of national interest, because the CEOs is what guides the aerospace industry, not Washington, D.C. And the CEOs have all got to stand together, and it has to be cooperation, because the Chinese and the Russians, once they get in control, they have no need to have these companies around. They're dangerous. They want to shut them down. So,
okay. All right, Jimmy. Love and light to you all, everybody out there in the internet land. Until next time, we'll wish you the best wherever your journey may be. And I guess I could say God bless. All that too. All right, Jimmy. Good night. See you all later. Please consider supporting Super Soldier Talk by purchasing your own Neo Meditation device. Your Neo Meditation device will help you reduce stress, integrate trauma, enhance intuition, enhance clairvoyance, and enhance creativity. Get yours now at www.neologicaltech.com.